In this video, I am going to show you how to use Ansible to manage your network devices and get rid of the boring, repetitive manual config. Whether you're working with Cisco, Juniper, or any other devices, this guide will help you automate configurations, saving time and reducing human errors. If you're new to Ansible or want to learn how to apply Ansible to networking, then this video is for you. Before we jump into Ansible, let's talk about manual configuration. So let's be honest here. No engineer likes repetitive tasks. It's the worst nightmare for any network engineer. So let's say we have an access list on a Cisco device. Maybe you are restricting SSH access and only allowing SSH from a particular source IP addresses. Now this IP address has changed or you have a new one and you want to add it to your access list. When you have one or two routers and they need the same access list, this can be okay. But when you have more like 10 routers, it can be a daunting task, or even worse, you can do human errors and you can get locked out. This is what we want to automate: repetitive, boring tasks. So what is Ansible? Ansible is open source automation platform application written in Python. It can configure servers, deploy applications, deploy software, and orchestrate advanced workflows. And yes, it can configure network devices. Ansible's main strength is simplicity because it uses YAML files, which anyone can read without any programming knowledge. Ansible is agentless, which means it's perfect for configuring network devices because it does not require any software to be installed on the devices you want to manage, making it perfect for network automation. While you're watching this video, I would like to ask you to subscribe and like my video. It will help me beat the YouTube algorithm and also compete with the big channels. Now back to the video. Okay, let me explain to you how all this works in a diagram. So the first thing we would need is to have Playbook. And the Playbook is literally a file that is written in YAML, and this file will contain tasks. So let's say we have task 1, and then we have task 2. These tasks are actions. So let's say task 1 is configuring an interface on a router, and task 2 is configuring an access list. This file will be also written in YAML, which we have explained a little bit earlier, and we will go through it a bit later on. Then the next thing we will need is what we call an inventory file. Okay, so an inventory is literally like a phone book where the control node will need to connect and perform those tasks. So an inventory file will contain example IP addresses. So let's say we have 192.168.1.2, 192.168.1.3, and so on and so forth. It will also contain username and passwords in this case because there's another way how to do it more secure. And all this will be on what we call a control node. Now, a control node will be installed on a most likely a Linux device where you basically use this device to reach out to other routers. So let's say, for instance, we have a few routers. So it would be router 1, router 2, router 3, and you can have as many as you want. Now, the control node will reach out to these routers. So literally will log into these routers and perform the tasks that you've written in the playbook. Now, the router's IP addresses will be in your inventory, and the control node will SSH to these devices, and you don't need any software or applications to be installed on the routers because it's using SSH. And that's the whole beauty of using Ansible. It doesn't need applications to be installed on the remote devices. Now that we've explained it on a diagram, let's see how it will all work in practice. In my Proxmox environment, I have set up a virtual machine. I'm running Ubuntu. I have SSH to the machine. And the first command we'll be using is apt update, making sure the packages are up to date. Once that's done, we can start installing Ansible. The command I will be using is the install Ansible. Since I've run update already, don't need to have this command. And here we go. So we're installing Ansible. The next thing I want to install is Python package, and here you go. That will be the command. I will list all the commands in the description below. Then the last thing I need to install is SSH pass, and this will help us to SSH into the router using a password rather than using a key. Okay. For this exercise, we would need two files. One would be the inventory, and the other one would be the playbook. Let's have a look at what the playbook contains. For simplicity, I have uploaded the playbook and the inventory files in my Git repository, and I will put a link in the description below so you can basically pull the site down and you can start modifying your playbook and play around. As you can see here, we have specified the hosts. So I specified router 1, which this entry here correlates with the entry in inventory, which we'll see in a moment. Getterfacts equals no or is no, and the reason would be this setting is more used for servers. It's to gather memory or CPU. In this case, we don't need it, so I've disabled it. Connection, this is how Ansible will connect to the router, and it will use network CLI. In most cases, it will use network CLI to connect to network devices. The other important factor is the module I'll be using, and for this exercise, I will be using iosconfig. And you can get modules, or you can check which modules are available in the official Ansible documentation. I will put a link in the description below. If you go to the Ansible documentation, you'll find a lot of different modules. And in this case, what I've done is I went to the Ansible documentation. I found the Cisco iOS, and there's various modules here that I can use. In this case, in this scenario, I'm using the iosconfig module. As I clicked on it, as you can see, it gives you a lot of different parameters, and there's explanations here how you can use this. Going back to the playbook, I have put also 3 entries, and the first one is match exact, and match exact ensures that the lines edit or modify will be matched exactly. If the line already exists in the exact form, no changes will be made. Now, there's also another line, which is replace line. Basically, what it does is that it instructs Ansible to replace the line if there's a difference between the running configuration and what's defined in the Ansible playbook. And of course, the last line would be save config after it's done. I have added another task here, and the other task would be to back up the configuration. The first thing I've done here, again, I've specified the host in which this action will be performed on. Same thing here. And here as well, network CLI. Now I've specified also a variable here, which is current time. So Ansible will do a lookup, date basically and time. And then I want to use the module copy, which is specified here, and then output the file that I will be backing up in this location. So it's going to run a show run, pipe it in a file, and the file will be saved in the location I've specified. Now let's have a look at what the inventory file looks like. In our case, the inventory file is quite simple. We are specifying router 1, the IP address of router 1, the username and password. Now, as you know, this is a test environment, so I don't recommend to put credentials in plain text file. There are other methods how to make this secure, but for this exercise, I want to keep things simple. Let's go back to the CLI and we can try this on the Linux box. So the first thing I'll do now is I'll pull the repository. We have the two files here. You can see that is the right one. Great. Now, before I'm going to run Ansible, I am actually going to show you how the router config looks like at the moment. Now, let's SSH to the router and I'll show you what we will be doing with Ansible. Show run will give us the configuration that we have on the router. And as you can see here, I have an access list 10 specified under line VTY04 for my SSH sessions. Now, access list 10 permits this network 192.168.100.0/24 and denies anything else. Now, if I do show IP access lists, I can see that now the router has given us the configuration, and also at the beginning of the line, it added the sequence number. So back to the Ansible, if I go to my tasks or actions, I can see now that I am placing this new subnet or this new access list in sequence 15. As you know, with routers, it works from the top to bottom. If I don't specify a sequence, it will put it at the very bottom, which means my access list won't work. Like this, because I'm specifying the sequence, it will put it between 10 and 20, which will make our access list work. So we've seen the playbook, the inventory, we have gone through the router configuration. Let's now try to use Ansible to push those tasks or actions into the router. So we go to the playbook location and we are going to run a command which is ansible-playbook. This time we're going to also specify the inventory and also at the end, of course, the playbook. You can see Ansible is trying to configure the tasks and he found the router one. You can see now that Ansible has done 2 changes and found 3 tasks. So if we go back to the router here, this is the old show run. Now if we do another show run, we should see the new line, which is this one. So we have a new network added to the router configuration, which is brilliant. So basically, it done what we've told it. Now, the second task was to back up the router configuration. So let's have a look if Ansible did do that as well. Back to the Ubuntu. So the playbook should send the configuration or output the configuration in this location. And as you can see here, it has backed up the router configuration with today's date and time. And if we do a cat and router1 and the backup name, you can see that it also has the new line. Ansible is very cool and you can do a lot with it. This is just the tip of the iceberg. So I encourage you to download this from my GitHub. I will put the link in the description below and try configuring a router, maybe interfaces, maybe a banner. Try something simple first and then move on to something maybe a bit more complicated. Now, what I don't recommend you to do is not to try this on a production site. First, try it in a lab. Once you're comfortable and you're 100% sure that you are familiar and you're doing the right thing, then you can move on to start using Ansible in your production environment. If you like this video, please like and subscribe to my channel. It will help me beat YouTube algorithm. So until next time, have a good one. Cheers.